So more than just being a consultant advisor at the University of Venda, I do this at SMU, the DHET, and with ECS as well. And one of my primary objectives from DHET is to develop sustainability at universities. So a few years ago, when we introduced sustainability to universities, it was a new concept. Although in South Africa, in terms of our SDG goals, it's not a new concept. So we found that as much as in other organizations, when we talk about sustainability, and if we extract one of the goals, you can't just look at one of the goals because they are interrelated. For example, clean energy, clean water, as well as clean energy, clean water, climate action. So these are, of course, related. So these are some of the things that we're trying to do at universities. My focus today is on renewable energy. And the case study is it's a study of the University of Venda and how we try to implement our 1 megawatt power facility, and to date, we still haven't done it. The intent from DHET was for me to share our findings and to give advice and probably get universities to learn how to implement these projects a lot faster, including PURCON. You heard our minister today, he said PURCON is a very important partner, and PURCON is there for efficiency in a number of our procurement business. When PURCON was formed, these are some of the key things or key matters that we discussed was on how would PURCON assist us to be efficient in our procurement process so that we could complete projects in the IEG cycles. So each cycle is 3 years, and when the funding is allocated, it's cash flowed over 3 years, and a number of universities, and it's regardless of whether it was a historically disadvantaged institution or whether it was one of our advantaged institutions or a rural institution. Every institution struggled, and I think there's a speaker, I think Professor Nell is around, and he's also talking about sustainability. And at UDE, he had a similar issue. So this is where we are. We went out to tender, and we are still struggling. So the research context and imperative was South African universities faced a challenge. So the challenge was not just on the load shedding and how to continue and maintain critical research and teaching. So the research operations in particular were for students that were working in laboratories. Now in the faculties of environmental science, or even if there was a medical science laboratory that had to run a lab for 48 hours with load shedding, that was interrupted. And of course, we had to then restart it. So this disadvantaged our students. The other is the economic pressures and the escalating tariffs and unreliable grid supply pose significant financial risks. And what was some of the financial risk? The financial risk came from the procurement of generators, the connection of the generators, ensuring that the electrical reticulation was in order for us to connect those generators, as well as the cost of the diesel to run those generators. Now, of course, with that came the sustainability issue. And the sustainability issue was, as you well know, with diesel, there's a lot of carbon emissions. So that's a challenge from a university perspective. So the primary aim for my research was to evaluate how contract strategy and governance, maturity influence delivery economics and the risk profile of campus solar photovoltaic projects in the South African higher education institutes. My key questions were, what strategic financial governance and factors shape the feasibility of Univen's 1 or possibly scalable to 3 to 5 megawatt PV project? How do procurement models and institutional maturity compare across Univen? The universities that I've been involved with is UFS, UWC, and Northwest University that have already implemented. I think it's UWC is in the process of implementing a 4 megawatt. So in that comparison, there's some outcomes which you will see, and then what contract strategies best align with life cycle performance and affordability in HEIs? And is there an alternative to forced subcontracting? Because one of the key things that constantly came out was you need to subcontract, and it's transformation, and you have to do it. Now, if you understand this industry, it's very simple. However, it's quite the type of products that you get out of the solar PV industry is, if it is to international standards, to IEC standards, it's relatively more expensive, and it's imported compared to what we might get from the East or from China or even from South Africa. So when we are saying let's subcontract 30%, what does that mean? Okay, so we don't, at the university, one of my findings are, and not just Univen, and many of the HEIs, I have found that it just gets included because it's a directive from government without understanding it. The question that needs to be asked is it 30% of the scope? Is it 30% of the value? What 30% is it? Is it labor? Or can it be labor and materials? Or what can it be? How do we do it? Now, as I said, if you understand the PV industry, subcontracting 30% is a tough job. And why would it be tough? Can someone answer me? Cabello? No? Anyone? Yes? So your technology is specialized? It's mainly about your guarantees and warranties. Okay? Because we want to hold the main design and build partner, I wouldn't call it contractor, partner. We would like to hold him responsible over a number of years. So it's extremely important that we consider that. And when we say subcontracted, you say, okay, he's reluctant and he finds someone, and someone that might give us local products that don't quite talk or last as long as his larger products. So you are bringing risk into your system, okay? So the University of Venda's strategic rationale was around, I've done an analysis and I conducted a desk study for the university, but that was done from a DHET perspective. Because I had motivated for some funding, and the question that was posed to me from DHET was, how can you confirm that the funding that you have requested indeed applies to this university and they will benefit? So I did a desktop study, and on the desktop study, I found out that our consumption is approximately 9.17 gigawatt hours, our annual consumption. Hence, the reason to say our demand is the need for about 1 megawatt. How many of my own colleagues know that? that's our demand for electricity off the grid every month. Any of you? So it's critical to understand that the amount of power you need. So when I had done that, I then put forth a proposal that we build a 1 megawatt plant to supply the energy that the university requires. And then I further proposed that the university, being in the location that it was, would serve us to do some community development and also export some of our energy to the local community, as well as to the immediate surroundings of the Thohoyandou CBD. So we often talk about in our strategy at the university about us becoming a university town because we are adjacent to the CBD. So the idea was, how do we have this coexistence with our CBD? And that's when we said, okay, if we have sufficient funding, we will be able to produce another megawatt which we could then wheel off. And what does it mean? So on our calculations, I had 3 models. As you can see there, the direct capex purchase investment was approximately 13.4 million. My NPV was 35.5 million over 25 years, and my return on investment was 269%. And that is substantial. In 5 to 6 years, a very strong economic case. So we also looked at including a battery energy storage, and that investment in total was 79 million. As we all know, battery BESS is rather expensive. So being so expensive, we said this might not be viable for us right now, but once we crunched the numbers at that time, although it was unfavorable, it has now come out to us being favorable and potentially having a BESS with a 2-hour backup battery. Then we looked also at the PPA, a grid-tied model. And on this, our tariff came out to 1,319 cents kilowatt hours. And we were paying something similar on our tariffs to Eskom. Our NPV, however, came out negative, and our generation was approximately 1.8 gigawatts annually. So it requires optimization. So we're still going to grid tie, even with the 1 megawatt. What was the issues that has now come across that we experience at the University of Venda? We had a number of governance challenges at Univen. We had, since 2022, multiple market engagements. These repeated procurement attempts failed to conclude in any award due to, and no disrespect to my colleagues, SEM inefficiency and evaluation capacity constraints. The team that was involved in the evaluation simply did not understand the evaluation criteria, which was highly technical, and they also did not understand what it meant to partner, what a power purchasing agreement was, and if we had to do an IPP, what that meant. They were stuck in the model of, we absolutely have to go through the procurement process of contracting, of doing an 80-20 model of financial evaluation and obtaining a cost. So we said, okay, in order to do that, this is what I can do for you, but do understand that we cannot award the contract on that basis because it has to be awarded on the financial model at the best case for us and the cheapest. We also then had CIDB alignment issues because when we advertised it as a absolute as a construction project, which it was not, because it's a design and build contract. And we had to resolve that. And on the third attempt, this year, our CFO, highly frustrated, who is now the COO, engaged PURCO and requested assistance so that we took all the politics and arguments away out of it so we could implement this project speedily. What we found is opportunity costs, and the delays are actually quantifiable in foregone savings and resilience benefits. How much do you think Univen lost in this process, colleagues, or any other university? Approximately? So take into consideration that my first investment is, say, 14 million for 1 megawatt. So if I go back here, 1 megawatt would have cost me 14 million rand. I don't think, I thought I'd put it in there. Okay, if we had to work it out from this slide, okay? So our average build, without giving off all of our information, the average bill at a small university with 16,000 students is about 2.8 million. It depends on the situation, of course, where it's situated, and the tariff that is charged. Now, this is a rural university, and we are currently on a rural tariff. So if it's 2.8 million, what does it work out to, colleagues, that we have lost? 3 times 12, 36 million per year that we have foregone in savings. Okay? The other 1 million that we would have wheeled, we could have charged a similar tariff of 1.3 or slightly below the tariff that Eskom charges, and we would have a revenue of another 36 million. So this has fundamentally hindered our progress in not understanding governance. So going to a triple P or an IPA or a private partner doesn't mean that you have to forego governance. What it means is you need to go to your university council and request permission to enter into negotiations, which we did. However, we still couldn't get it right. So we eventually now are still going to market. And the issue that I'm concerned about, and I'll come back to this, is institutional maturity assessments. So delivery success. In my case study, UFS, and I've worked with UFS for many years, when they started their first implementation at Kwakwa, because I still am responsible for developing our, as we used to call them, HEIs, historically disadvantaged institutions. And I went to the Kwakwa campus, which was put under the leadership of UFS. If you set foot on Kwakwa today, you would never, ever have imagined that that campus was previously a rural or HDI campus. It has really gone forward in leaps and bounds. And why is that? Because if you look on this diagram, you can see that the technical capability at UFS, its maturity, is quite high. It's almost at 5. We have the same at Northwest University. And in 2017, just to go back again, Kwakwa campus, or UFS, put in just under 1 megawatt to power Kwakwa campus, because that was the demand. Okay? They took away their generators, they put the generators together so that should we have a dip, should we have a dip in the power, or should we lose power, for whatever reason, then the generators would kick in and work together to keep the power on, particularly where students needed it the most. So this maturity rubric that I've got in here shows us governance and strategy, commercial literacy, and technical capability is extremely important in delivering projects successfully. If we don't work together to do it, we won't be able to do it. Okay, we need to change, as many speakers have said today. How do we transition? How do we go from legacy, which is a normal NEC type of contract, to putting in a power purchase agreement? There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody in the world uses a power purchase agreement. Okay, you just need to understand the terms and conditions. And we would be putting in power purchase agreements ourselves if we were wheeling out and we sold power. So absolutely important is commercial literacy. Technical capability, of course you need it, because you need to understand certain things. But colleagues, trust me, this is not rocket scientist work. It's been researched, it's been developed. It's a matter of installing those panels, hooking them up. The sun does all the work for you. Convert it, put it into your MV line or whichever, or your low voltage line, and feed it to your building. Similarly, as most of us have done in our homes. It's just that this is on a larger scale, because your home demand is far less. So, in the study, you can see Univen's, on Univen scale, it's nascent. And UFS, Northwest, and UWC leading. UWC is at 4. They were also previously a historically disadvantaged institution. But if you set foot at UWC nowadays, you would never tell that it's a HDI. And this is where we want to go with all of our universities. In particular, Alice, UFH, Univen, Mafeking is there, it's Mahikeng now, it's under Northwest, and it's the Mahikeng campus. The same with Kwakwa campus. These have been integrated into the larger universities, and they are faring pretty well. Lagging behind is Univen and UFH. But we are coming along, and hopefully this time round, Cabello is going to assist us to put the correct contract in place. Now, these are the success stories that we looked at, and in my comparisons, Northwest University, they pursued a university-funded CapEx, similar to what we proposed for the 1 megawatt. They did put a 1 megawatt system in place, and they implemented it across rooftops and carports due to space. So they have 15 mini systems, and they all feed into the main campus grid. They had an immediate reduction in bill. They reduced the diesel reliance during load shedding, and they had a portfolio-wide expansion towards a multi-scale megawatt plant. University of Free State has scaled and grid-tied PVs across all 3 of its campuses. As I said, starting with Kwakwa, since 2017. Their savings, 32.5 million savings by 2023 realized. 41 million savings by 2025 realized. Approximately 8 megawatts of power has been total installation. And it's all got robust performance, and they've got building management systems in that monitor, records, keeps all of your data that you need, and it could actually pinpoint to you to the point that now UFS can work out how much of electricity one student requires or consumes per room in his residence. So we can all do it. It's there, it's simple, and it's in one of the things, the most important thing in student housing is to save costs, because most of the students are NSFAS funded. So critical success factors for us, colleagues, is contract strategy. And why is it so paramount? Is because energy assets require performance over decades. It's not a typical construction contract that does not internalize tariff risk. It doesn't internalize degradation of your panels or your electrical cables. And it doesn't even consider your O&M, which is operating and maintenance incentives or the cost of maintenance. The hybrid approach integrates construction with long-term O&M and better align counterparties with life cycle outcomes. And there is fundamentally an opportunity as well for subcontracting, as where your IPP now transfers skills into your organization in how you would operate and maintain this large facility. Economics and risk allocation. Direct CapEx yields the strongest NPV, and number of universities in the 7th cycle and on the 6th cycle were granted an allowance for sustainable projects. So most universities could afford to implement at least a 1 megawatt. What do we need to do? We need to have a clear executive sponsorship, a capable estate function, and routine performance tracking to underpin delivery and scale. Because we found that governance delays and forfeits viable savings if you had to stay in the legacy era of tendering. So our strategy has to change. Recommendations for Univen: adopt hybrid contract model. So you can do it. It's not an issue. You can pair a CIDB compliant EPC with binding O&M obligations and performance metrics. You can include explicit tariffs from your financial model output and your return on investment benchmarking over 20 years. You can prioritize your tier 1 providers. Now, when we talk about tier 1 providers, in the solar PV, it has a special meaning. It doesn't mean a TrendCon, a tier 1 contractor. It means a provider that gives you equipment that meets all of the international regulations as well as South African regulations. Strengthen our governance structure. We should constitute a Renewable Energy Steering Committee with council oversight and formalize evaluation capacity for IPPs and PPA offers and standardized SCM pathways. So we can start with a CapEx tranche and commission our 1 megawatt under direct ownership. That way we're going to capture our near-term savings, and then we'll expand and blend as financing capability grows and capacity. And then, of course, the most important thing is how do we embed community integration. So we're going to design for future surplus sales and incorporate student internships and local supplier development. So a sector-wide recommendation for HEIs and a future outlook is a shared advisory hub. Particularly, I'm looking at PURCO for this. We need to establish an IPP PPA advisory capacity to standardize financial models, risk allocation, and KPI templates across PURCO South Africa member universities. PURCO must also do continuous benchmarking with comparing Eskom tariffs, PPA rates, and CapEx low-cost, life cycle cost evaluations. And they need to do that to maintain affordability and inform procurement decisions. Build internal capability. We need to appoint energy managers and data analysts. Institutionalize measurement and verification practices for performance tracking. Phase and scale. Quick wins, pilots, quick payback, CapEx installations, then replicate portfolio-wide, integrating your efficiency measures for maximum impact. So in conclusion, colleagues, campus PV is financially and operationally compelling, but execution sensitive. In that, you need the correct contract strategy and institutional maturity to understand what I've just been talking about, more than technology. Contract strategy will determine the pace, the scale, and the savings that we meet. Because in this case study, this is exactly what we found. We found that the contracting strategy and not understanding how the IPP and the PPA would operate, that has set us back. We then need sector-level advisory capacity, standardized templates, and disciplined benchmarking that can accelerate delivery across South African HEIs. Now, on the paper itself, where's the paper? Have we put the paper up? On the paper, you will see that I've put an addendum, and on the addendum, I've spoken about forced subcontracting and how can we do it. And there's no need for us to use that kind of language to say it's a force, because that's how your contractor or your supplier feels, that you're forcing him to do something. What we should be doing is down, please. Yeah, just one more up. Yeah. So on this addendum, I've put down some strategic advice on how you could do this and what we intend to do at the University of Venda. So we're proposing a community benefit model that ring-fences an equivalent commitment into measurable local socio-economic outcomes that align with Univen's RFP. And the emphasis is going to be on additional community benefits and skills development. And that is as the optional establishment of a university chair. The very first time in 2022, we had a company called Norsk, and I'm sure many of you have heard of it. It's a Swedish company that undertook to provide Univen with a 1 megawatt plant that they would own and operate, undertook to provide us with a reduced tariff that we were currently paying, as well as providing us a university chair where we could do research and students could also participate and do research. And through governance, we failed to take this offer up. So towards our empowerment targets, we shall look at electrification, partnerships, we'll look at community facility development, we'll look at skills transfer and training and community development funds. Then these are some of the options that I spoke about in terms of the KPIs that we need to put into our contract if we are absolutely adamant to use an NEC form of contract. And then how the bidders must respond is to provide us with the community benefit plan. Now, this is what I'm talking to with Cabello and PURCO, and this is the way we are planning to go forward in the future for HEIs. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. What a beautiful presentation. Can we then maybe open the floor for any questions or comments? Okay, I see there's no one. Oh, there we go.
Thank you. This topic is quite close to my heart and quite interesting because it also affects even some of the areas where we work. By the way, my name is Mpopapo from Val University of Technology. So my question is this. Just on the point where you've ended about governance and how it can also prohibit this kind of opportunity. So I want to know, how do we then relax governance without compromising its legitimacy to achieve some of these objectives so that from the contractual perspective, this kind of deals can go ahead? Thank you.
It's not complicated at all. Your contracting strategy is very important. So as an institution, it needs to be decided right up front, not when it comes to procurement. At project initiation, and when you are busy developing your business case, we need to understand how are we going to go to the market. Do we have CapEx? Yes or no? If we don't have CapEx, then it has to be a relationship. It's going to be a partnership with a power producer. There's a limited number of power producers in this country and internationally. And what you can do is do your research on your desktop and you identify the power producers and perhaps even what the other universities are using. And you can motivate to your council because remember, as much as we are bound by the PFMA, we are a Schedule 3 company on the PFMA. We are an organ of state. So it is not critical that we have to do. Besides, the accounting officer in a university is the council, and you would motivate your council with your business case as to why you would like to approach a closed market. This is a specialist industry. Okay? Once you're out in the open market, you can get a return of 40 or 50 potential service providers. You are compelled to evaluate that. And this is what Minister was talking about in terms of long procurement cycles. So therefore, understand your market. Market analysis is very important. Correct motivation to the correct delegated authorities enables you to take one of the procurement routes that could be single source, sole source, closed bidders list, send out an expression of interest, short list, and you could end up with the correct tenderer. Now, that's not bypassing governance. That's all within the infrastructure procurement policies. And it's already on the website that we've developed many years ago on how to deliver projects within HEIs. So your procurement route and your contracting strategy are ultra important. So it could be easy or it could be difficult. It's up to you. Does that answer you? Okay.
Any more questions?
No, there is a question. Sorry, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Sue, for the presentation. The recommendations.
Yes.
Yes. the recommendations and the issue of the more than 2 years that was lost in procurement because of the specialized skills that were required to procure this. So was there anything done? Is there anything done in terms of avoiding something similar in the future? Number one, that's in terms of the procurement skills. And number two, in terms of the recommendations, has there anything been done also as well on that front? Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Malema. Mr. Malema is supposed to have declared his interest before he asked me the question. Colleagues, my colleague and my director from DET, Mr. Malema. And he's one of those colleagues that have worked closely with me on the sustainability. And Mr. Malema, we hope through Cabello and through PURCON that we can implement these recommendations ASAP. And in terms of the governance, we can put a practice note in terms of the contracting with the KPIs, all of that, we can put it into a practice note. And hopefully we could invite, or PURCON could market to the HEIs assistance to develop their solar photovoltaic plants with the experience that they are now gaining with us from Univen. So it's been difficult because sometimes Mr. Cabello there thought, I don't want to talk to that lady. But he's come around, and I think he understands now where I'm coming from and what we need to do. So yes, we aim with this study, and we aim to educate all of our HEIs and bring them along in terms of speedy development in terms of clean energy. So some of the universities, perhaps in the Eastern Cape, would use wind technology. But for us, solar is perfect. The irradiance that we actually receive at Thohoyandou, it's excellent. Okay, I think I've run out of time. Does that answer you, Mr. Malem? Okay, we'll discuss.
Round of applause
Can see more
once
work.
again.
Thank you,
sorry.
colleagues.
Is there more questions?